Hi, and welcome to New Gods Sunday School. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics and Fantastic Four Grand Design. And today we're talking about Mr. Miracle #1. He cheats death, he defies man. No trap can hold him. Mr. Miracle. My enemies think that escape from this is impossible, but they're in for a rude shock. Goodbye, Mr. Miracle. You lost your wager and your life. Super escape artist, the making of a legend. Kirby's here. You can feel the excitement of these, the #1s, the Kirby DC #1s. He's excited about what he's working on. The company is excited about the prospect of stealing some of the Marvel thunder and bringing it back to DC. It's before the whole relationship goes sour, but you can just feel the excitement and just all the blurbs on the front. And I love that they're trumpeting Kirby's here. I mean, back in those days, sort of the idea of like a superstar comic book artist, writer was, it wasn't sort of the same thing that it is now. There's not too many other people you could think of where they trumpet their name on the front there. I've always loved this cover. It's just, really beautiful. The colors are great, and the design of it and Meet Mr. Miracle, super escape artist in the murder missile trap. When DC starts canceling the New Gods books, when they cancel New Gods and Forever People, Mr. Miracle is the only survivor, and I think because the basic concept of Mr. Miracle, just like New Gods was like its own thing, and Forever People was its own thing. But Mr. Miracle fits really well in with the whole, DC universe. He's got a cape, he's got a colorful costume, with lots of like flair and visual business going on, and he's got a simple concept. Super escape artist. You can boil it down. It's very simple. The other one, New Gods and Forever People, were like a little more complicated, a little more off the beaten path. Now, that's not to say that Mr. Miracle isn't as deep or as interesting as those other two. It's just that it has this this hook. It has a visual hook and a conceptual hook that the other two didn't have. A visual hook and a conceptual hook that can be easily communicated to, DC editorial and to the readership and to the fan base. The color of his costume is, instead of red, green, and yellow, it's purple, green, and yellow. On the cover, it's the classic colors, and from what I understand, it was a coloring error that was corrected in subsequent issues. But story wise, it kind of plays out because we're seeing here, it's sort of Mr. Miracle has a lot of sort of fake out beginnings, like a James Bond movie or something where you get the little story at the beginning and then the rest of the movie is something completely different altogether. One of the fake outs here is, you think you're watching, the hero of the comic, Mr. Miracle, but actually this guy down here is the hero of the comic. That's Scott Free. And then this is Thaddeus Brown, had a long, illustrious career as the escape artist, Mr. Miracle, and his assistant Oberon. Jack Kirby doing his in medias res thing. Mr. Miracle has had, Thaddeus Brown, Mr. Miracle has had a long, illustrious career in the mind of the reader and in the mind of Jack Kirby. But this is, the first comic to feature any of these characters. He sort of establishes a legacy character right there on the first page. You think about, if you know anything about this series or these characters, and you just think about all the things that have happened to Scott Free before this, page one of Mr. Miracle, and it's like, wow, yeah, this really is in medias res. I mean, which again, that's to me a lot of the power of this whole, Fourth World, New Gods meta series is just how it just feels like a real world. Like it feels like its own world with a history and a future, and every bit of it, every comic just scratches the surface of this, much larger thing, and it sort of compounds the tragedy of it being canceled so early. When you have a comic where there's just so much to say, so much going on, and it gets stopped before it really gets rolling. And then you think about other comics where, like, the creators had no idea what they were doing. They were just pulling stuff out of their hat, and it goes nowhere, and they get hundreds of issues. Some of these comics are still running. Some of them, comics that Kirby himself worked on. He's had comics where he went in with kind of a half-baked plan or not much of a plan, and done 100 issues of, and then here he has this comic that he's been this series of comics that he's been marinating, that he's been thinking about and working on for years, and has like a whole world built up for them, and then gets to put out a little over 10 issues each before the plug is pulled. But, we can be thankful for the comics we have, not the ones we don't have. Mr. Miracle is acting out his escape routine, a new routine he's working on. And he's not doing it on some big stage. He's doing it, on, sort of, what looks like a farm, wooden post fence in the background. And this young man's just kind of watching the proceedings, a silent witness to all of it. And then Oberon, torches this wooden shed, this outhouse that Mr. Miracle's locked in. And are you mad? What have you done? You don't understand. He has a chance to escape if he can manufacture a miracle. Now pitch in, get some help. And then boom, he comes bursting out of the death trap. This is amazing. How did you get free of your bonds? You had only seconds. Professional know-how, son. Seconds are all Mr. Miracle needs to cheat death. Here's where, we reveal Thaddeus Brown, and he meets Scott Free. This comic, it talks a lot about sort of professional methods and, being a professional and stuff. And again, I feel like this is another semi-autobiographical story for Kirby, like Forever People #1, where it's about, this old generation, which Kirby's part of, and then this young generation. And the old generation are sort of these, professionals who have, this, their techniques that they've honed, that are, at their height, and with sort of death in the future, with a decay, a loss of technical prowess, and then you have a young generation with their new bag of tricks, their literal bag of tricks that Mr. Miracle shows up with. The kids are green around the gills, but they have a new bag of tricks that the older generation couldn't have even imagined in their time. And sort of, Kirby's, admiration of this new young generation that his kids were part of, but also, standing up for, his own techniques. And when Scott Free introduces himself, ha, I don't believe it. Scott Free, eh? Ha ha ha. Forgive me, boy, but the name does evoke a reaction. It has in the past, sir. I was raised in an orphanage, and many of the foundlings were given such names to sort of, well, make them feel as individuals. So, I mean, we're just getting a taste of Scott Free's backstory. And in later issues, the backstory is like incredibly rich. And I do wonder how much Kirby has worked out. How much, when he's writing these lines, how clear a picture does he have in his head of sort of granny goodness and the orphanage on Apocalypse? Or if, he sort of maybe has a vague sense of Scott Free's past, which only comes into focus the more he, sets it down on paper. But you can tell he has big plans, for all this stuff. And the idea, it sort of comes from, it's like a Dickensian thing. It's like Oliver Twist, where, there's the orphanage and they give all the kids these names that are kind of like puns. So Scott Free, the guy who escapes, Olive or Twist. Artful Dodger, names like that. Intergang shows up, just another element of this world that we've seen in other issues. We saw it in Forever People #1. It's been in the Jimmy Olsen comics that Kirby was doing around this time. But so here's Intergang, Darkseid's super mafia on Earth that does his bidding. Darkseid's name is never mentioned in this issue. It's interesting. Of all these sort of early, fourth world comics, this is the one that, at least on the surface, seems the least connected to that, larger framework. It seems more like its own thing because we have Intergang, which is, Darkseid's Intergang, but they never once mentioned Darkseid. He has a mother box, which he doesn't call Mother Box, at least in this issue. The opponent he fights isn't from New Genesis or Apocalypse. He is an Intergang boss, but just judging by this comic, you could assume that Intergang is a completely earthbound and earth-funded and earth-run enterprise. That they have high tech, not that they're using alien god technology. Intergang guys try to intimidate Mr. Miracle and his friends. There's some great Jack Kirby hand-to-hand combat, bonking two guys' heads together. I realize that I have no right to ask, but are you involved in some way with Intergang? Not with Intergang Boy, with their division chief in this area, Steelhand. Yeah, all through this story, you get you keep hearing about this trouble that Mr. Miracle is in with with the mob, with the super mob, and you don't really get a sense of what's of what that is until the end of the story. His opponent, Steelhand, who just shows up this one time and never again in Jack Kirby's series. Of course, had it run 100 issues, who knows? He might have become a recurring presence. But he's got this. He's this super crime boss with a hand made of steel. With this hand made of steel, and the visual and the character, it makes me think that Jack Kirby was riffing on Dr. Strangelove. He looks like Dr. Strangelove, and with those goggles and stuff. And I can only guess that maybe Jack Kirby had initially named this character Strange Glove, or named him Dr. Strangeglove or Strange Glove, with this sort of metal hand he has. And maybe thought better of it, since it was too close to the actual name. And whenever you see the word whenever you see the title Dr. Strangelove, it does kind of look like Dr. Strangeglove. And in the movie, there's like a scene where he's sort of fighting with his own hand, like Ash in Evil Dead. Kirby was just always just sort of riffing on things, and that's just my own theory. To think I was once at the end of my rope, a sniveling little loser with his hand blasted by a Tommy gun. Then came a turn of luck. In the hospital, that surgeon experimenting with transplants. He gave me this new hand. I didn't know its history, but with radiation treatments, it gained power. Power. My life changed after that. I smashed my way to the top in Intergang. But there's not a lot of overt connections to the sort of New Gods mythology in this issue, but I do wonder when he talks about the hand and its history, I wonder if there is more to it than it just being this sort of mechanical, robotic hand, with radiation treatments it gains power. I wonder if that hand is somehow related to Apocalypse and Darkseid. I think maybe this aspect of Mr. Miracle helped it survive, when they canceled the rest of Jack Kirby's New Gods books, because it can so easily be detached from the larger mythology, as opposed to the other ones. Now, not to say, this, as the series goes on, it gets very deeply connected to Kirby's mythology, but it also has this sort of separate aspect. He can just be a crime boss who has a high-tech hand. He doesn't have, demon with the glass hand. He doesn't have to be, he doesn't have to be a guy with ancient alien god technology. And, Mr. Miracle, the other thing, so many of Kirby's superheroes are so sort of urban, their adventures clearly taking place in Manhattan or some version of Manhattan, even if it's a fictionalized, DC universe version. But here, Mr. Miracle is centered in the suburbs, living in this nice old house. And Thaddeus Brown is telling him about his career and about his son Ted, who died in Korea. Later on in the series, Ted comes back, showing him his old photo albums of his old career and how he had his son, and his son was his manager and was a big part of his act. And now that his son's gone, the act kind of went to seed. Ted must have been a great fan of Superman. His old posters and, "Son, it would take a downright genius to improve on my methods of escape." "Maybe he is a genius, Mr. Miracle." "Well, I'm willing to listen to a genuine bona fide genius. We'll test him." "I'm not a genius, sir, but I think I do have a bag of new tricks." And so then Mr. Miracle, Thaddeus Brown, chains him up, and he gets very quiet, very calm, and boom, the chains just shatter without him moving a muscle. Mr. Miracle, after his escapes, a magician never reveals his methods, but he kind of tells you what he did. He just says, "Maybe I used this. I can't, who could say for certain?" But he says, "There's more to this than modern technology. What's in that bag of yours, son? Perhaps things like this. Who is to say that those chains couldn't fly apart under intense magnetic repulsion?" You have like the old pro and then this new young hotshot with, state-of-the-art techniques. And, as the story goes, Jack Kirby was having dinner with a young Jim Steranko, and Jim Steranko was telling him about his youth as an escape artist, and then that just fired Jack Kirby's imagination, as things tend to do. Just his imagination just started going a million miles an hour, and then created this. As a result of that conversation, this idea of a super escape artist comic book. And so when I see this sort of the old pro and the young hotshot, and I can't help but think that Jack was sort of talking about him and Steranko, or at least his perception of his relationship with Steranko. That Jack Kirby is Thaddeus Brown and Scott Free is Jim Steranko, and that they have their different techniques. You have sort of a sort of friendly encounter between these two generations that have very different ideas about how to do things, but and each one fascinated by the other. Scott Free kind of fascinated by the nostalgia and the history of Thaddeus's career and background, and then Thaddeus kind of fascinated by this bag of new tricks, and I'm still curious about that bag. Now, Steel Hand, to eliminate Mr. Miracle, he hires a sniper, and again, this is less than 10 years after the Kennedy assassination, and it's after Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy, and so this sort of sniper and assassin's bullet is it's just all over the consciousness of the time, and sort of finds its way here. And you think about all the sort of like exploitation movies that came out that would reference that. And so they're setting up a big trap, another death trap for this rolling steel ball, but at the same time, Thaddeus is shot, and so now he's not going to be able to escape. So Scott Free has to step in and fires this bolt that diverts the steel ball. Steel Hand said he could devise the big trap, the one that was escape-proof. I should have known he meant death. So, I mean, that statement kind of lays out the thematic underpinnings of this series and of this character. The big trap is death, and I think of Grant Morrison's Mr. Miracle series that he did, and how he must have been sort of riffing on some of these things, because that becomes the ongoing element in there was that the escapes were it was just death. It was just this avoidance of death. that this is one way of facing death. So Scott-free, in Thaddeus Brown's dying moments, Scott-free pulls out his mother box. He doesn't call it a mother box, so but it does all the mother box things. It ping, ping, pings. This is what was in my bag. It looks like a box, but it has a strange power in it. It's over. He passed away peacefully. A peaceful death seems like an ongoing theme in this series, in all of this meta series, and that that's one of the functions of the gods is this sort of peaceful transition into death. I mean, prior to this, we saw the mother box in Forever People #1. In New Gods #1, Orion doesn't reference or use his mother box either. So, I do wonder if Kirby had sort of the Forever People mother box, and then he has this device that Mr. Miracle has, and if maybe, at some point after this, he thought, how about instead of just that particular one being called mother box, what if they're all called mother box? What if that's, instead of being the specific name of that sort of talking, pinging cube in Forever People, what if that just becomes the generic name for all of these, like Band-Aid or something? Oberon fills you in a little more on the backstory. We haven't been giving a specific reason for why Steelhand is stalking Thaddeus Brown, and so, we finally get it, that they were in the hospital together. They made a bet, sort of, I guess, a half-joking bet for $10,000, shook on it, just something to pass the time, that the wager was that Steelhand boasted he could stop Thaddeus with an escape-proof trap. They made this bet. They did shake on it, but Thaddeus didn't really have any intention of following up on it until he decided to come out of retirement and needed some seed money, and so he approached Steelhand for the money, and then Steelhand, realized he wasn't going to give this guy $10,000. Welch on his bet and save face was to kill him. Interesting logic, but organized crime was on Kirby's mind at this time. But Kirby did In the Days of the Mob, so I mean he had a lot to say about organized crime at this time, and it works its way into these books, in the form of Intergang. So now he's going to arm wrestle a robot, and he beats it. There's a concept for another comic. How about a super arm wrestler, kind of like a superhero version of Over the Top? I don't believe it. You're dead. The age of miracles isn't over yet, Steelhand. Look again. So yeah, this idea that he's showing up, in that costume, and it kind of freaks him out. It's revenge from the dead. It's Mr. Miracle. He can escape anything. By the time I read this story, I had already read, a bunch of other Mr. Miracle comics, and the excellent one that Mark Evanier and Steve Rude did in the 80s, the one-shot. So I'm trying to imagine someone reading this in 1971, right off the stands for the first time. And, they don't, information is sort of given out in this in a suspenseful way. So I know that that's Scott-free in the costume, but nothing in the story tells you that. So if you're reading this, you would just be like, oh, wow, Thaddeus Brown defied death somehow. I saw him die, but here he is. He's back. Mr. Miracle's back. Mr. Miracle, he's alive. The guy's a hoodoo. Scott-free kind of facilitates the continuing of Mr. Miracle's act, and proves that you can't kill Mr. Miracle, by him becoming Mr. Miracle, him donning the suit and adopting the identity. So you can imagine this, it's like the Phantom, I guess. Lee Falk's Phantom, that has the reputation of being immortal, but it's really just a bunch of different people, wearing the same costume. Now we're up to the cover. They chain him to a rocket and send him into space. An exploding rocket, a missile, goes up, it explodes. That's that. I mean, this spectacular death, which is the ritual of the escape artist. It's sort of this spectacular death, and then you're alive. There you are. You're okay. And I'm not the first one to make this connection, but Mr. Miracle is sort of interpreted as a Christ figure that he dies and rises again, and repeats that ritual again and again, symbolism of it. But anyway, he comes back to his office, and who's sitting in his chair but Mr. Miracle? He karate chops the desk in half, which we'll see Non do in the Superman movie with Christopher Reeve. In Superman 2, he karate chops the desk, and he karate chops Perry White's desk in half. There's a little bit of a scuffle. Mr. Miracle is explaining, I can show you how I might have done it, Steel Hand. Again, he doesn't reveal his tricks. I might have hidden hyper sound intensifiers in my gloves to break the metal chain. And now he's using it. See what sound waves do to your steel hand. Perhaps I used miniature retrojets to blast free of the missile. Does this rocket punch. And then one of my favorite elements from this character, and a compact cocoon spinner, which turns out yards of plastic material at fantastic speeds. It may have made a chute for me, but it will wrap you up in a package for the law. And Kirby, develops that compact cocoon spinner further as the series goes on, and it becomes almost like a prototype of like an airbag. Kirby's a phenomenal inventor. He was just doing it for comic books instead of actual products. Come in, officers. He's all yours. The charge is homicide. You timed this perfectly, Scott. If you didn't, put two and two together, that's the only time that's the reveal that it was scot-free all along. That's where that's where the last shoe drops, where you find out that it was scot-free who had taken over the Mr. Miracle identity. It wasn't Thaddeus Brown back from the dead. I never read this story that way because I already knew that Scott-Free takes over the Thaddeus Brown mantle. But anybody watching this video, if you were there, if you read this in 1971, or if this was the first Mr. Miracle comic you ever read and never heard of the character before, I'd love to know, like, did you read this and then at the end, was that a surprise reveal that it was Scott-Free in the costume? Because up to that point, like, you go into this, you don't really know anything. These are all new characters, which is what's so exciting about this whole meta series. You've got a great act, Scott. I'd be proud to assist you. Done, Oberon. From now on, we're both part of Mr. Miracle, Super Escape Artist. It's a passing of the torch, and he, as a debt to a new friend, takes over the identity. And so the act goes on to other satanic and sinister situations simmering with mounting magnitude, to juggernaut jousts with the Super Escape Artist's greatest adversary, death. He will always be seconds away, swift, relentless, final. Follow Mr. Miracle, enter the next trap, the impossible X pit. The letter X, Jack Kirby, co-creator of the X-Men. And in this whole fourth world thing, his letter, the letter that's in the corner of each page, each of the title pages that he draws has an X number. Kirby's letter designation is X. He has the X pit. He talks about eliminating X factors in this. He talks about, in later issues of the New Gods, talks about the X element. So X, Kirby's all in on the letter X. It's a shame none of these new comics were called, the X something, the X gods or something. Get in on some of that X money. It's this issue, more so than the other issue ones, is really about this character and this inheritance of this stage act, and less about the larger mythology. But he is in somewhat of sort of a crucified position on this rocket. And the idea of Mr. Miracle as a Christ analog is reinforced by the fact that in later issues it's revealed that his father is the king of the gods. His father is High Father, who's sort of the closest thing to a God figure, the God of the Bible. And he's his son. So he's his son who's on Earth to and gets together with his cast of characters, his crazy circus folk, his carnies. But anyway, Mr. Miracle, I mean, he's the most enduring of Jack Kirby's Fourth World creations. He stood the test of time in a way that the others didn't. Continues to get revived from time to time, and you can't say the same about Orion or the Forever People. Mr. Miracle has one of the best superhero costume designs of all time. I mean, hands down. And in the end, that's what it's all about. I'm half joking here, there's other elements to Mr. Miracle that I think I mean, he's a survivor. He survives death. The other comics got canceled. He survives death. He's an avatar of escaping death, and he lives up to it. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics, and Fantastic Four Grand Design. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time for New Gods Sunday School.